Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 279 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and a two-time author. Our second book is called From Letters to Leaders, Redefining New Member Education and Leveraging Belonging to Eliminate Hazing. So go and pick up that book today on Amazon. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, both of my parents are actually from another country. They're both from Israel. And my sisters and I were the first generation of the family to be born in the United States. My parents were so concerned with labels on their children. So they only spoke to us in English. So that now sacrificed our knowledge of a secondary language and a culture to a certain extent. I was also originally born as a lefty, but my parents forced me to become a righty because they thought I would have a hard life as a lefty. Little did they know it completely screwed up my brain. But hey, they did what they thought was best to avoid a certain label that lefty people are somehow disadvantaged. So let's talk a little bit more about labels. Our next guest is Elaine Mercedes Mendoza. She helps people identify the labels they are holding on to as being in direct correlation with their worth. Once we learn to identify what is controlling us, we can let go of unhealthy attachments to labels to find our freedom and our happiness. Now, Elaine does not just talk about diversity and inclusion. Her whole life has been about honing her skills as an activist for a more equitable world. As someone with 4 controversial labels, she knows firsthand what it feels like to be on the receiving end of prejudice. You might have seen her TEDx talk. It's called The Power of Labels to Change Your Story. Welcome to the show, Elaine.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's my pleasure. I absolutely loved your TED Talk. As soon as I watched that, I said, Elaine needs to be on the show to talk about labels because, man, oh man, what a fascinating TEDx talk. It left me with so many questions to explore after I watched it. So let's go back to your childhood. I think that's probably the place to start for our listeners that maybe haven't heard the TEDx talk yet. You were 4 years old when your parents said that you were moving to the United States. Then at age 6, you remembered a neighbor that didn't want to play with you. So how did that one particular event when you were 6 years old impact your childhood?
Yes, well, that was one of my earliest memories in the USA. You know, my family was from Venezuela. I was actually born there. And I was getting to know the neighbors. I was not even aware that we were the only Latino family in the whole neighborhood. It was a mostly white neighborhood in Montgomery County, Maryland. So I'm playing with the neighbors, you know, Atari was the thing back then. And suddenly they just didn't want to play with us anymore on one side of the house. And as a 6-year-old, you don't know what that means. You don't know where it's coming from. One day they play with you, the other day they don't. So you take that very personally. You feel like somehow there's something terribly wrong with you, and we don't have an adult mind. So we start to internalize these feelings of what is wrong with me. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's something, and it made them reject me.
Oh my
So,
goodness. Yeah, I mean, we grew up in the same time period. I remember Atari was like the big thing. If you had an Atari, that was it. Everybody was coming over to play, and we were going to be there all day long playing Atari. I mean,
and I got one for my birthday, so I was sharing my Atari.
Good for you. I'm surprised. I mean, the Atari, the whole neighborhood descended on the house that had Atari. So if you had Atari, that meant you had some friends. Obviously, friends, but you had some friends. And then, as a senior in high school, you are now watching these cheerleaders on campus. I'm assuming at football games. You even knew all the cheers. But you didn't actually want to be a cheerleader. You wanted to date a cheerleader.
Yes.
So how did you feel at that moment when you had that revelation?
Rude awakening.
Yeah, like mind-blowing, like.
It wasn't like a conscious thing. I just knew that I was watching them a little bit too carefully to the point that I memorized the cheers. And then I asked myself, I'm like, I don't really want to be a cheerleader. Why do I know these cheers so well? I was attracted. I was attracted to them, and I started to notice that I was a little different. Just like heterosexual people start to go through puberty, so do bisexual, gay, and everything in between. We start to notice it around that time as well. So for me, it was more of a natural thing. And then I started saying, oh my God, but this isn't accepted. This isn't accepted in my family, my religion, our society. I have 3 gay brothers as well. So I knew that it didn't go over so well for them, and they were older. So I knew at that point, oh no, I have to shut this down immediately. I can't have these attractions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You saw those other experiences with your family and you're like, I'm not sure I'm ready for all that comes with that. So I totally get that. I mean, you decided on American University in Washington, D.C. for your undergraduate experience. I'm curious, what made you choose American of all places?
There's an interesting point to this, and a lot of people don't know this.
Yeah.
When you are an international student, and I know that the media likes to say, oh, immigrants come here and they get the best of everything. It's not exactly like that. So even though my parents had homes in Montgomery County, paid property taxes, as an international student, I was going to be charged a lot more if I went to the University of Maryland versus a private college like American University. So most people don't know this fact. So my dad said, hey, if I'm going to pay more money, you might as well go to the private college. And I had an older brother that went to American as well as other people. And I thought, okay, they have one of the best communication programs in the country. That's where I'm going to go. And my dad said, it's going to cost me the same anyway. So.
Wow. I had no idea. I'm so happy I asked you the question because I think you just cleared up what I think is probably a big myth within the United States that somehow,
Yes.
You get the best education for no money. I mean, that's not exactly the way that it went. So that's really fascinating. I'm happy that I asked the question.
I'm glad you asked the questions because I really wanted to clear that up, because every
Yeah.
time I look at the news, it's like, oh, immigrants get everything taxpayers don't. I'm like,
You're like, no.
who is making this up?
It's not even true. So,
No.
okay. So in your TEDx talk, you said something that was very interesting to me. You said labels have the ability to tell your story in ways that are not correct. You were a successful college graduate. You ended up learning all of West Side Story, which, by the way, is my favorite by far of everything.
Good.
I mean, oh my God, it's such a great show. But you learned the whole story to pursue your dreams on Broadway. But those labels were ignoring everything that was going on in the background, because in the background, you were an F1 student. You had a visa that was expiring 1 year after graduation from college. So what happened there?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I've never been able to share this to this extent. It's that international students can go to college in the US. I mean, they're more than happy to take our money and we can study for years, and then the reality check. Of course, I grew up in the US, so I never imagined that anything bad would happen. I just thought okay, it's some paperwork, I'm going to fill it out, I'm going to do everything legally, I'm going to do everything right. But the reality of the situation is that we get a 1-year work permit. Now, I have 2 college degrees. I have a degree in communications from American, and I have a 2-year musical theater degree from AMDA, which is one of the most prestigious musical theater schools in the world. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go on Broadway, but let's be realistic here. It may take more than 1 year to make it to the Broadway stage. Mm-hmm. And during that year, I auditioned as much as possible. I was getting hints that I had talent and that I was going to make it eventually somehow. And then the reality check of my F1 student visa.
Oh, crushing.
Yes, it's like trying to become a doctor, and then they tell you, thanks for studying all these years. You've been studying voice lessons since, for a long time, but yeah, you can't pursue your dreams. Sorry.
Yeah, but they were happy to take your money for the education.
Oh yes, American, AMDA. It's not really their fault technically, but they're happy to take the money, just not too happy to have you stay afterwards.
Right. So now you start searching for a new identity. And later on in 2012, you finally get the opportunity to be a citizen of the United States of America. So why at that point did you feel so let down when this was the goal?
Well, because it took, the first time I arrived in the US was 1980, the first time my family arrived. And I graduated from musical theater school in 1998. So I just lost 14 years, not just of my personal life, living as a prisoner in my own country where I grew up, but also my professional career was gone. Because let's be honest here, show business is a young person's world where you start growing your career. By the time it got to 2012, and the woman says, "Welcome to America," I was like, it felt like a slap in the face.
Yeah.
It just felt like, wow, you just ruined my life for almost 2 decades.
Yeah, that process took a very, very long time. And then it's hard to pursue your dreams at that point because you're right. I mean, I've been to Broadway many times. I was born in New York City. I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what's up on that stage. I can see, and so, I totally get it. I totally, totally get it. All right. So Latin American, immigrant, LGBTQ, female. These are 4 labels that are really used to divide and start defining who people are in this country. So why are some of the labels worthy and they're good, and then other labels are seen as unworthy?
You know what? And I had that same question.
Mhm.
I had that same question. And it became almost like a personal thing that I needed to discover why. Like, why was I not deserving of pursuing my dreams just because I was born somewhere else? I mean, something that I can't even control or even remember. It's like the lottery, the birth lottery. And I found this term in marketing that it's called perceived value. And it's the reason we pay so much money for a Louis Vuitton bag versus a $10 purse. Something is perceived to be more valuable than somebody else. And then I realized, wait a minute, this doesn't just apply in our society to things, it's actually happening to people. So all you have to do is turn on the evening news and you'll see how labels are being used. The way immigrants are talked about, the way white people are talked about in show business versus other people. You just look at the stereotypes, look at a movie, look at the stereotypes that's constantly being sold to us.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I started noticing was if an immigrant crossed the border and committed a crime, suddenly the focus would be on their race, nationality, ethnicity. But if a white person goes into a school and shoots people, but they're born in the US, guess what? They are mentally ill. We need to feel sorry for them. So I started to pick up on, this is the way labels are dividing us. We're being sold different stories depending on the label that we carry. And
Yeah.
that's a problem.
You're so right. I mean, just watch the news and you'll see it. I mean, it's as obvious as night and day. It's so interesting that you bring all of that stuff up. But, I also think that it's not necessarily just something that's going on in the United States. I mean, we're seeing this all over the world.
All over the world.
Yeah.
It's spreading like wildfire.
We are absolutely. I mean, I see this, we are the best type of mentality in countries all over the country. And anybody who comes in as an immigrant is somehow looked down on. I mean, and no matter what country you're in, I mean, that philosophy has just spread all over. But it's just so interesting that here we are, we call ourselves the United States of America, a country that was built on immigrants. And we have that same attitude that we see all over. Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. So you learned how to process that anger, right? I mean, you have some deep-seated anger over, these labels. And so how can the students who are listening right now, how can they process the anger that they're dealing with also?
I think that anger is it's a feeling that's there to tell us something's not right here.
Mhm.
So it's really, if we look at it as guidance and we trust that guidance, something's not right here, what are we going to do about it? So one of the things that I started to really observe is, what is my role in this mess? In this mess, because everyone thinks they're right. They have the right political views, they have the right ideas. So I started to realize that I can add to this division and say, I am right because, or I can look at the situation from a different perspective. So instead of being angry, like, you got to vote for this candidate, you got to vote for this person, you're adding to the fuel you're actually technically adding to the fuel. So most recently, I saw this argument come up with the whole vaccination thing. So now it was the people against the vaccines versus those who wanted to get the vaccine. Boom, it's the same argument in another issue.
Mhm.
So what are we going to do with that anger? Are we going to ridicule anyone who has different views from us? Or are we going to sit down and be like, okay, this is our common ground? So for the kids that are angry right now because of their reproductive rights, because of their political parties, we have to sit down and realize what is the common ground, because I may have different political views, but we all just are trying to live our lives to the best of our ability. But it's impossible when we're fighting each other, because at the end of the day, as long as we're fighting each other, the person who is manipulating this is winning. The politicians, the corrupt politicians, the governments that have, every perk imaginable off of our tax money. So as long as people are pointing elsewhere, we're not noticing the real problem, where it's coming from, who is causing this division, how is the media, how are labels being used to keep us fighting each other so we don't notice the truth.
You make some really, really great points. I mean, you and I grew up in an era where I think there was a lot more discussions about what we have in common as Americans. I mean, we all want safety. We all want good schools for our kids. We all want to feel respected, right? I mean, we all want to be able to make a living and be successful, right? And so like we share so many things, but we don't focus on that. We focus on political ideology, and suddenly you're now my enemy because you happen to vote for a different person than I did in the election. I mean, we have so much more in common than we do opposing views, but we don't stop to think about that. And it just seems like today, boy, oh boy, is it polarized. Oh my goodness. It's just, I wish that we could return back to that time when we focus more about what we had in common versus what we have that is different. So, oh my goodness. Okay, so if our listeners feel that for some reason they are not welcome, that could be at college, that could be at a job, whatever, because of the color of their skin, because of their religion, their sexual orientation, or anything else, what do you think is the best response if our college students don't feel welcome?
I think one of the things that was hard for me to realize, and my dad had a saying that summarizes it perfectly, is we are not a $100 bill for everyone to like us.
Right.
So at the end of the day, there's always going to be your people that love you unconditionally as you are, and there's going to be people that are going to criticize you to death. You can't do anything right in their eyes. And whenever you receive that rejection or that lack of acknowledgement that you're okay, that you're a cool person, it's just a lesson for us that, you know what, those are not my people, and that's okay. And you move on and find those that love you for who you are, as you are.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's a lesson we all have to learn in one way or another. Not everyone's going to like us.
Yeah.
Fact of
It took me a long time to realize that, if I'm being honest with you. It took me a really, really long time to realize that. But now I've come to that realization, and my life is much better. But I think it's the way that we're wired. We as human beings are all wired in such a way that we want everyone to like us. I think maybe when I was in college and I was the treasurer of our fraternity, I realized that I had a budget, right? This is the budget. And all my fraternity brothers would love to come to my room and say, Mike, we need money for XYZ. They wanted to spend money on all kinds of things. And I literally had to print out a sign that said no in my room. And I would just point to the sign because I was so sick and tired of telling them no. I would just point to the sign and just say no. Because I had a budget and all of that money was accounted for. And if I spent money on other things, we wouldn't have money to do the things that we really wanted to do that year. And so, I had to say no. And it was hard because these are my friends. I wanted them to like me. I really, really did. Especially in college. That's really important that everybody loves you. And I think I realized then that not everybody is going to like me, but it was for the greater good. I knew at the end of the day that I was going to get certain things accomplished as our treasurer that nobody was able to accomplish for 10, 15 years before me. And sure enough, we got the composites on the wall. These are pictures of all the brothers on the wall, which was very expensive. I mean, it probably was like, I don't know, like $1,500, $2,000 at the time. It's probably more expensive today. But we knew that we wanted that, up on the wall. And nobody had done it for the past 10, 15 years. But I said, we are going to do this as part of our budget. I just have to keep saying no. And sure enough, it was the first time that we had that. And then it continued after that every year because we knew what a great thing it was. But it took somebody to basically say no, and somebody who realized that not everyone is going to like you.
Nope.
And so I think it served me well, So, all right, now I know, you were trying out for Broadway, and I know that anybody who tries out for Broadway loves to sing, and I bet.
Oh boy.
I'm willing to
You're gonna
bet.
put me on the spot, aren't you? You're gonna put me on the spot.
I'm willing to bet that you want to belt out a Broadway tune right now.
Any requests? Let's see.
I mean, listen, I love, if you want to do West Side Story, I mean, I would have no problem with that.
Let's see. Well, I'm a Sondheim fan, and he passed away last year.
Yes.
So I have been listening to a lot of his music. So let's see.
There you go.
The sun comes up, I think about you. The coffee cup, I think about you. I want you so, it's like I'm losing my mind.
Wow, eat your heart out, Broadway. Look what you missed out on.
Look what you missed out.
Missed out. It's Elaine Mercedes Mendoza, man. You got the chops. You can do it. I mean, man, oh man, Broadway, if you're listening right now, Elaine will still take your phone call. I'm just telling you.
I must share this with you because this happened less than an hour ago before our interview.
Oh my gosh.
But I wrote something on Lin-Manuel Miranda's Instagram, and he liked it in less than 10 minutes. And I saw that as a sign that even though I have a tragic story, the world clearly has changed. So I look at those glimpses of hope.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm so happy you got that glimpse of hope, because that tells you got to keep on moving. You got to keep on chasing those dreams. It doesn't matter, the age or, where you are in the world. Keep chasing those dreams, but you've got it. You've got it inside you. I know you have it in you. So keep doing what you do. And I think it's fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective with our college students today. I know that they're going to love this episode, and they got some free songs to boot. So, I mean, that's worth the price of admission. They didn't pay anything to listen, but that's worth the price of admission. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Elaine, for what you do. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And it's a pleasure to meet you today.
Yes, of course. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this talk with Elaine, please like it on social media. Please share it on your social media account with other college students, other fraternity and sorority members that need to hear Elaine's words. I think it's so powerful that she talks about labels and really the power of labels to change your story. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. We hope to see you on another episode real soon. Thanks for coming, and we will see you next time.